Hello to everybody. I'm very happy to open our second colloquium in this semester. And now we are beginning.
Dear members of the European Academy of Sciences and Arts, dear guests, welcome to the second evening in our lecture series, Arts Meets Medicine. As president of the European Academy of Sciences and Arts, I welcome you again. Again, I thank the two deans of the classes of music and medicine, the classes of arts, but especially music, to put together the two lectures this evening, Violeta, Dinescu, and Dušan, Šuput. Thank you very much again. Tonight, China is at the center of music therapy and medicine. All the more I regret that I have a panel discussion on this important and great country on the topic of science and innovation in Berlin at the same time this evening. And sorry that therefore I'm only joining you via video. But when it comes to China, the same questions always come up, no matter from which topic one approaches this great country. First of all, there is its culture, which spans thousands, hundreds of years. It is hard to believe that music therapy inspired by Confucianism can have an impact on specific cancers in the Asian region. But visiting a center of traditional Chinese medicine near Beijing some years ago, I was able to see for myself how modern and traditional medicine interpenetrate and how much psychological, that means by our soul, psychological and physical factors interpenetrate. Intuitively, this may make sense to us. This makes it all the more urgent to provide evidence-based and empirical support for these insights into medicine. The case studies presented this evening obviously contribute to this. Closely related to this is the second lecture this evening, which is about a dialogue with nature. But in the end, isn't that just a metaphor? Can you communicate with nature at all? Either you observe the rules of nature in time, or you will suffer the consequences without pardon. With the current climate change, we currently have an inkling of what that means. Once red lines have been crossed, it is impossible to negotiate with nature. At the beginning of modern age, Galileo said that the laws of nature were written in the language of mathematics and not in Latin, Greek, and Hebrew, which was the language of the Bible and theology at that time. But in the end, mathematics is only a medium, just like music. We have to understand the signals of nature and our bodies in time and draw the right consequences in everyday life, in the natural sciences, and in medicine. I wish you exciting discussions this evening, and thank you for your attention.
Now, Dušan, you are coming.
So now I think it's my time to present the first speaker, Peter Herrmann, who is Doctor of Philosophy, and he studied sociology, economics, political science, and social policy and philosophy. So it means his education is very broad, and he has been active in so many fields. Currently, he lives in Berlin, in Germany, and also in China, in Changsha, working at Human Rights Center Law School at Central South University in Changsha. He worked as social philosopher within the EU and also globally. And now he's adjunct professor at the University of Eastern Finland in Kuopio, honorary associate professor at Corvinus University in Budapest, the Faculty of Economics, Department of World Economy. And he has been teaching at many, many institutions across EU. And he was correspondent to the Max Planck Institute for Foreign and International Social Law. Now he still holds many important positions like senior advisor to the European Foundation of Social Equality in Hague. He's a member of advisory board at Eurispes, at Instituto di Studi Politici, Economici e Sociali in Rome. And he's been a member of scientific board and its coordination committee at ATTAC, Association pour la taxation des transactions financières pour l'aide aux citoyens. And he's associate member of Eurasian Center for Big History and System Forecasting at Lomonosov Moscow School State University in Russia. And he's full member of the European Academy of Social Science and Arts. He's been visiting professor in many, many institutions within and Europe and broader. Well, I think that maybe I should make it a bit short because we could speak about his achievements and positions for an hour. But I'll focus on his latest main interest, which shifted towards developing the social equality approach even further, looking particularly into the meaning of economic questions and questions of law. And he linked this with questions of development of state analysis and the question of social services. So recently his interest shifted towards political economy, globalization, and formational change. And in this context, he's in particular interested in questions around change of labor work, precarity as seedbed of new political economic formations, which is quite an important topic also in Slovenia, where I come from. Then sustainable socio-economic growth, socio-economic sustainability, and so on. So I think that the best is that, Peter, you start with the lecture, and I think that all I said will be clear from your wonderful presentation. Thank you.
Well, thank you for the introduction. Many places where I could get lost, and I'm lost again with this topic, I have to say, in some way. And so far that in general, we speak or we are confronted with a paradox. On the one hand, we have a certain understanding of law, of jurisprudence, what it is. It is, in actual fact, highly abstract, beginning with the presumption that it is possible to grasp the complexity of individual and social societal life in a formal approach. And this is necessarily linked to equalization, fading out all these complexities. And still we think it is concrete, we know what the law is about, and we have a certain understanding in this way. On the other side, the following presentation seems to be very abstract because it does not refer immediately to these known understandings. I think it requires to step outside of what we usually say. I just finished reading a book on artificial intelligence and the future, basically, where one human beings, there is a human being left, says, always he says, people have learned by coming into contact with other opinions, other ideas, other worldviews, and they only learned this way. What are you getting at? Asked Julia. You can only learn something when you come across something you don't know yet. That should be without saying. And now you come, artificial intelligence, and tell me it's not a problem if people are only bombarded with their own opinions. Peter turns to the audience in the studio. Everything everyone hears from us is only an echo of which we have shouted out into the world. It's Quality Land, the book, and I think it shows exactly the problem in science as well. To some extent, we are caught in our definitions that we have, and we are afraid to move outside of the box, as it is said. And a very provocative question then is, looking at nature, at artificial intelligence, is there actually any at least good reason for the relevance and importance of human beings in the universe? Any reason that shows the necessity or desirability to survive? But already this formulation is of the question is highlighting the problematic. A misguided understanding is behind it, rationality as utilitarian take on existence. If you ever read Douglas Adams read it, he's talking about the puddle. Everything is made for the puddle until everything disappears, including the puddle. We have a misunderstanding of human beings, seeing themselves as a center of everything, establishing an anthropocentric worldview, and as well the planet. Actually, we know that it is not the center of everything, and subconsciously we still think it is. It had been Sigmund Freud talking about this as major frustrations as a consequence of qualifications of human beings and the planet Earth. Now there comes another disappointment, frustration. Human power, we think it is unquestionable and unlimited ability. In individual cases, we fail. We are not healing everybody, but in general, we think we can do everything, perceived as almightiness. With this, Konrad Paul Liessmann, an Austrian philosopher, said, we have been confronted with the pandemics as questioning this almightiness as well. There seems to be another paradox, as more as we, as human beings, are becoming aware of the fact of limits, of these limits, of the scope and reach of our actions, as more we are in fact losing the ability to control the power we have. And this entails, and there I come to one of the core theses, this entails an increasing awareness of the loss of our self-understanding as social beings, as more as we are interwoven in interrelationalities, as less we accept them. Individualization, cocooning, singularization, and with all this different kinds of arbitrariness, we can just do what we want. Again, the paradox of all this culminates in what I want to call self-creation of and self-establishment of arbitrary and almightiness of individuals. Coming back to the quality land, he would be omniscient. And of course, it would be possible for her to change not only the virtual world, but since almost everything can be controlled by the internet, our physical world as well, entirely at her will. She would be omnipotent. Now, tell me, what do you call a being that is omnipresent, omniscient, and omnipotent? God, asked Peter. The old man smiles. Yes, now you understand what I mean when I say that in an ironic twist of all that religions have tried to teach us, it is not God who created men, but man who will create for himself a God. You will see later what this has to do with the question of new approaches in law. And of course, we are dealing with very complex ontological and epistemological issues, also meaning we tend to answer the question easily in a simplified way. Being aware of this, I dare to propose as major origins of this shortcoming. Philosophy, the Cartesian sharp distinction between subject and object. The subsequent nearing of the eclipse of reason, which Max Horkheimer eloquently reflected upon, the subsequent multidimensional alienation we all live through every day, and not least the move of academia to positivism, now prevailing in science and social science, although I never liked this distinction between science and social science. Now, alienation as a societal problem. As I said, it's a multidimensional character of alienation, which deserves following brief elaboration at least. We have to distinguish different dimensions of it. Labor alienation, the worker as consequence of the shift from use value-led processes of production of the production of exchange value. We don't produce what we use, we produce what we can exchange. And with this truncation of exchange value-led activities from use value-led production. Then we find economic alienation, alienation of the exchange value-led productive processes from use value production. With this truncation of managing from regulating and controlling productive processes. Then we find another dimension, organizational alienation, alienation of organizations from set goals and objectives as a result of administrative sovereignty. They can do what they want. Truncation of management tasks and their externalization. Then political alienation as management from requirement of regulating life and living, alienation from that, and truncation of a self-reflexive political system oriented towards and defined by the goal of maintenance of power, establishing itself as politico-administrative system, increasingly independent from the socio-economic rubric. Now we find a double movement with this alienation. On the one hand, it's the classical Marxian approach, the alienation of the worker. Don't want to engage much in this. I want to show another dimension, that alienation today is as well alienation of the upper classes and not least of academic circles, spreading from there into society. Here it is about the awareness of the limits of power, including the reflection of Easterlin paradox. Easily said, money does not make happy. And it is about the pathological illusion clinging to the idea of one's own omnipotence and mortality. Trying to fight mortality, we invest so much time by using pharmaceutical products and that we actually don't gain anything with it because we invested just in maintaining ourselves. Now there is a broad economic background to it, and it is the increasing denaturalization of the economy as matter of production, being less concerned with the production and reproduction of people's daily life, and it is increasingly a self-referential process. A short quote from Walter Womaker's autobiography, an artist, showing what I mean. The income for additional jobs he got had been a welcome supplement. And as the tax law had been simple and easily manageable, everything had been well ordered. 20% of each of these payments had been deducted and immediately paid by the client. Thus, the state did not request using time for meaningless tax calculations. Different to now. One did not even need a beer mat to do this calculation, and the time saved could be usually employed for really important things. Now look here at your tax declaration, look at the bureaucratic administrative effort to get your old age pensions, if you get one, and all this. Huge processes of work, but at the same time, deducting this time from what we really need. In short, whereas administration and regulation have been originally mere auxiliaries, enhancing labor as metabolism, it gained increasingly an existence in its own right. Coming back to the initial question, indeed, there is no need for human beings to exist, not at least from the perspective of the universe. You see, I read Douglas Adams' Hitchhiker Through the Galaxy. This means, in turn, we must refrain from seeing the world made for us. And equally wrong is to see ourselves as being made for the universe. Moving a step further, we must overcome the underlying notion of any utilitarian approach, simply accepting that we do exist, that we want to exist, and most importantly, that we only do exist as part of the universe of which we are part, and of the universe that has an existential right in its own. This means not least that we must refer to the right not as right to exist, but as right to coexist. And this translates into the need to overcome the dichotomy of subject and object, Cartesian approach, seeing subject and object as entity. Now I quote, according to Spinoza, every existing thing is part of a whole, which is itself part of a still greater whole, and everything it contained in the greatest whole to be assumed in God or nature, Deus sive natura, as he said. However, every existing thing is also something for itself that organizes itself in relation to the external on which it depends. In ethics, Spinoza uses the term conatus, striving to persist in its being, to define its selfhood, this selfhood of each individual. This also applies to man. Although he is not state within a state, he is, like the stones, the plants, and the animals, part of the all-encompassing nature. In other words, no special provision applies to him, but the general laws of nature. His behavior, like all natural phenomena, follows the laws of causality, knowledge of which is sufficient to understand it. And this is important, that there is the other side to it, namely creativity. In short, this challenges in a fundamental way the view on nature, and increasingly the view as well on artificial intelligence as external forces that are at most passive, only reacting. One of the challenges is that both today's nature and today's technologies in forms of artificial intelligence, digitization systems are shaped by humans. Up to now, we thought we are the gods, we are almighty, we can shape it. But what we shaped, or the interest behind it, had been economic interest, so very limited approach. In the case of nature, we are dealing with a nature that is already deformed by these interests. And in the case of artificial intelligence, digitization, we are currently still deforming it. The voices of nature, we heard this earlier, are coming across in a very violent form. The voice of extreme rain, wildfires, melting Arctic ice. Where there's no reason for any dystopia, there's a very strong reason still to underline this fact that it is man-made. We are responsible, up to now. It means that we as humans are in a position of defining the stop rule as well. Not acknowledging this means that we are entering a wrong path, namely one that maintains the status quo, juxtaposing humans, nature, and technology. This is today misleading as it had been historically when the Luddites destroyed the machines, or in other words, in actual fact, they hit the messenger. Finally, their problem had not been the machine as such, but it had been the use to undermine their existence. And this is what we do with nature. And the interest behind it, I quote Polanyi, in the 19th century, civilization alone was economic in a distinctive sense, for it chose to base itself on a motive only rarely acknowledged as valid in the history of human societies, and certainly never before raised to the level of justification of action and behavior in everyday life, namely gain. The self-regulating market system was uniquely derived from this principle. There was no social control anymore. And paradoxically or not, and due to whichever constellations, one of the main contradictions of human existence so far is that between humans as individuals, acting in a time frame of a maximum of 4 generations, and humankind with a non-final time perspective. Now coming to the law side, and we have to accept that we have to overcome, again, to emphasize this juxtaposition of nature there, artificial intelligence there, and we as humans, we are the only subjects. We have to stop seeing nature as something external, still going hand in hand with the myth of fire-breathing dragons and lightning-wielding gods. And we have to stop to see artificial intelligence external as ex machina, if you ever saw this film, or Draculanian power gases. Now I would like to engage a little bit, or pointing out a little bit what we have. We have climate court cases in respect of climate. They all point back on our interest, the interest of future generations, the interest of certain areas, regions, but there is nothing about the right of nature. And this is, I think, a major problem for law. Now I would like to show the slides, or the slide, if you can do this, please, which confronts the two sides. On the one hand, or the current main characteristics of jurisprudence, and then what I think the way where we have to go. Can you share the screen?
No, we did. You have to share. You have to share the screen.
I have to do this.
Yeah.
No, I think he cannot, because he does not have permission. I think you are the only one who has the permission.
Okay. Yeah, it works.
It's okay now. Yeah.
No,
Okay. So in black, basically, you see what we have now, the current mainstream approach, and in red, then where I think we have to go. And we have to discuss it. It's not an easy thing. Coercive enforcement of law by the state. That's what we have. But I think it is the strict orientation on a balanced appropriateness, not in the name of the people speaking law, but by the orientation on concerned subjects and in the interest of sustainable existence. Then the second characteristics of law today is the enforcement of law by means of formal proceedings, in particular court proceedings, but also administrative proceedings, decision-making, and enforcement of decisions. What we need is an enforcement of law by discursive processes. We cannot say this is just a form and this we have to fulfill. This is procedure and this is the most important. We have to think along the line of what I call a time-reversed common law procedure, not referring to previous judgments, but looking what is the judgment of the future with all the interested parts, actors. Then we have the written fixation of law. It's not absolute necessary, but it is most likely in the current system. And I think we have to orient, or we need the orientation on written guidelines, exploring criteria for solving conflicts. And we always are dealing with conflicts, balancing the interests along the lines of sustainability. And this is, of course, the standard term today, sustainability, but taking nature seriously as such, not in our interest, and the same taking artificial intelligence seriously as such. How can we use it and how can we work together with it instead of allowing it to take over, to arrive at a new singularity, if you want. Fourth characteristic, the establishment of law in a special procedure as a matter of democratic legitimation. Sounds good, but establishing a discursive procedure securing all relevant actors, times, and locations that are involved in the process of judging. Relevant means those that are immediately relevant today, but also those that are indirectly concerned. Today, here and now, tomorrow, somewhere else, and in the future. The orientation towards the realization of justice. The orientation, what we need is towards a realization of sustainability, taking the following dimensions into account: social justice, appropriateness, respecting the interest of different subject matters, not subjects, come later back to this, reflecting of spatial conditions, which are different in different regions, at different times, and the reflection of time. And we should not stop with these criteria. We should always be open to add new criteria. Then the final characteristic is the legal certainty as characteristic of law. It follows from the enforceability and the fixation of content, also including the possibility that the individual can enforce his or her right, if necessary by force. Again, sounds good, but legal disputability is what we need, following the tenet of any system geared towards justice. Cui bono, guiding the two questions, unde venis and quo vadis. From where do we come and where do we want to go? This means that we have to redefine as well the subject, bringing together the legal subject and the societal subject, what matters in society. What we have now is the subject must be able to have rights and obligations under the law. Now, a little bit provocation again, going beyond formal equality. That's what we need. Accepting the ability to have legal rights and obligations is very much a matter of power along the lines of capability and appropriateness. Even if we have the same law, legal conditions, it does not mean the same for everybody. We can speak of the need to move from formal assessment to the resubstantialized understanding of subjects, referring to the meaning of central category. Just a reminder, the famous majestic equality of law, forbidding everybody to sleep under the bridges. That's valid for the poor person as well as for the rich. I think it had been à la France. Second, the subject today must be able to act in their own name. Seen and heard as actor is in its own right, standing in a causal, though creative relationship to others. The relationality of human beings, nature, and artifacts. That's what I think we need. We have to think about. The third point, legal subjects must be able to sue and to be sued in court. But what we need is not the limitation to the court cases. We have to acknowledge all players as actors, referring to their impact and the prospective consequences for other players, and just and sustainable balance between them. Of course, we cannot bring or allow a tree to come to court and sue somebody or being sued, but we have to think for the existing, for the right of the trees, for the right of nature, for the right entailed by them as subjects in their own terms. Finally, the subject has to be held liable for their actions. I think the subject must be approached as subject matters, as I said before, instead of applying it in a reduced understanding of an acting subject immediately being responsible. With this, accepting them only as conscious being. So I think this is a guideline for future discussions we have to engage in. And I say at the same time, I do not want to deny the success story of positive law. And I also say this without denying the operational difficulties of moving such a way forward. But looking at easy, simple solution is not what we need. And in this way, I want to conclude with a quote from John Stuart Mill in his book on utilitarianism. Probably many of you heard it or read it. It's better to be a human being dissatisfied than a pig satisfied. Better to be Socrates dissatisfied than a fool satisfied. And if the fool or the pig are of a different opinion, it is because they only know their own side of the question. The other party of the comparison knows both sides. And I think we know that the way we move forward in the way we treat nature, in the way we use artificial intelligence, and in the way we use law is, I would provocatively end here saying, foolish. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Wonderful lecture. Excellent introduction and showing some solutions regarding law. I'm quite, well, actually, I'm looking forward to ask a few questions at the end. But as usually, we will just continue to the next speaker, next two speakers. And Violeta, please do the introduction. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Peter. Herrmann, thank you also very much, Dušan, Šuput. I have the pleasure to present now, we could say, a new form of our colloquium, because the next speaker, who is Kim Mao, the young Chinese scientist, will be in a kind of correspondence and presented by Wolfgang Mastnak. It's a very nice story about this, and you shall see in their communication. It's interesting that both of our speakers today, Peter Herrmann and Wolfgang Mastnak, they are acting on two continents, from one side in the middle, in the heart of Europe, and also in China, which is nowadays something very important. I would just say a few words about Wolfgang Mastnak. He is not the first time with us. He was invited also in the colloquium in the University of Oldenburg and also in our EASA. He is a member of Academy. Wolfgang Mastnak holds six doctoral degrees in medical sciences, sports sciences, sports medicine, mathematics, art therapies, music education, and psychology, as well as professional diploma as psychotherapist and motor therapist. At this moment, you could ask, how many lives is living our Wolfgang Mastnak? He receives also a lot of awards. He is professor of Beijing Normal University, Shanghai Conservatory of Music, and the University of Music and Performing Arts in Munich. He is also president of the Austrian Heart Association, and his main research areas include cross-cultural psychosomatics, psychiatry, arts therapies, health education, public health, preventive medicine, sports therapy, and so on. I can tell you, when he presented his speeches in our colloquium series, I received always a lot of resonance and people asking to be with him in communication. And I have only the pleasure to say some words about Qi Mao. She is a very young scientist. She's 28 years old. She is born in Hunan, in the south part of China, and she studied music therapy, music education, vocal performance, psycho-oncology, clinical psychology. And I would give the floor to Wolfgang Mastnak in order to continue this incredible presentation of our young Qi Mao. Please, Wolfgang.
Dear Violeta, dear Dušan, thank you very much indeed for this nice introduction. The speech today, together with the Mao Qi, is about music and psycho-oncology. So, music in oncology looks back over several years, and at the very beginning, there was the idea just to use music in order to distract the patients, to create a positive atmosphere. And due to clinical research, due to explorative research, we found out that music in oncology has a broad spectrum of positive functions. On the one side, on the one hand, it can alleviate stress, can lower anxiety, can lower depressive states, especially in last stages of cancer. Moreover, we have research that music can lower the sequelae of chemotherapy. So it can reduce the normal responses of vomiting and so on. It has a very positive impact, for example, the stomach cancer, on the sleep quality, on digestion. So it's a broad spectrum, and we encounter something like a miracle. So in medicine, we do not like miracles very much. We want to find out what is it. On the one side, we are doing evidence-based research on how music works with parallel groups and so on. What is for me very exciting is to find out underlying mechanisms. So we use, for example, magnetic resonance imaging to find out how we can, through music in cancer patients, lower anxieties, how we can improve self-identity failings in case the identity is broken. We use also tumor markers in order to find out if music has a special impact directly on the tumor. So this is the medical research. And we found out that the cultural background is of enormous importance. So we cannot use the same approaches with special music in China, in Germany, in France, and so on. So we have to bring in the miracle. We have to bring in the feature, the characteristics of music, of the musical and cultural background. of the patients. This also has to do with the ontology of music. For example, in Taoism, the harmony is not only a musical harmony, it is the harmony of the universe, it's the harmony of the body and mind. It is very complex. So today, we are focusing in China, especially on music and the arts in oncology, in psycho-oncology, and I have the really great pleasure to present today, together with Mao Qi, who is, although she is so young, she is today the most outstanding expert on music therapy in oncology in China. Moreover, she's also a master of the Wuqing, this ancient stringed instrument. She has done research in breast cancer and music therapy, and 3 years at Beijing University. Research on music in stomach cancer, especially in terminal stomach cancer. I would like to invite you now, dear Mao Qi, to present your 3 years research and the outcomes. It's you to go on.
Thank you for your
introduction. We can hear you. Yeah.
Okay. Dear experts and scholars, I'm very grateful to Professor Violeta and my doctoral supervisor, Professor Mastnak, for their introduction to me just now. I'm Mao Qi, a postdoctor in Peking University. Today, I want to share with you the theme of Chinese music therapy in psycho-oncology. I will present it in the following 4 parts. According to the International Top Medicine Journal, the lancet on the trend of global cancer survival research report shows that the survival rate of cancer patients in developing country is lower than that in developed country. Why is that? Because supportive care is lacking in developing country. And we can see in this report, gastric cancer is not only the most common cancer in the world, but also the 3rd cancer in incidence and mortality in China. The patients with gastric cancer, they not only have to bear the psycho-oncology distress caused by the cancer, but also bear the huge influence caused by the potential biological factors of the brain-gut axis, 脑长轴. So, psycho-oncology distress in gastric cancer patients is very high. However, the incidence of gastric cancer is low in Western countries, so it is rarely studied. In contrast, it has a high incidence in China. Therefore, gastric cancer patients in China become my research object. Nowadays, many studies have shown that music therapy can improve anxiety, depression, and pain in cancer patients. It can also reduce the occurrence of stomach reactions and improve the quality of life of patients. So music therapy was chosen as the interventional method in my research. In previous scientific research on music therapy, I have found that there are three main problems. Firstly, as I said, gastric cancer is less common in Western countries than other cancers. So most studied in China and abroad focus on breast cancer patients with the highest incidence in the world. In this context, there is less evidence for the effectiveness of music therapy interventions in patients with gastric cancer. Secondly, there are still limits in the study methodology, design, and less attention is paid to the psychological mechanisms by which music therapy works in cancer. So in my research, I will use a mixed methodology design to integrate the advantage of quantitative research and qualitative research. The third point, interventional model and methods. In the past, the music therapy methods used were single or limited because cross-cultural study had shown that there are very more difference in the psychosocial needs of cancer patients in different cultural background. For example, Chinese patients are influenced by collective cultural cognition and Confucian Chinese family culture. And there are certain differences between Chinese patients and Western patients in family function, garden language, attitude for their health and their disease. So we now need a set of music therapy innovation programs and research evidence to the local Chinese cultural context. So my research take into account the cultural community, the cultural and individual difference of Chinese gastric cancer patients. The objective is to explore the intervention model of music therapy applicable to the social, psychological, and cultural of Chinese people, and to provide empirical evidence in the future. This is my research design drawing, which comes from my Chinese doctoral thesis, use an embedded approach of mixed method study design. The embedded qualitative interviews into the end of quantitative research interventions. This design can help us answer research questions with two different types of data. Now, I will introduce my research. It is divided into three studies. Study 1, Innovation Model Construction and Program, Development of Music Therapy to improve psychological pain in gastric cancer patients. The third study is quantitative study. Evaluate the intervention effect of music therapy to improve the psychological pain of gastric cancer patients. The third study is a qualitative study, which is an analysis of mechanism of music therapy to improve the psychological pain of gastric cancer patients. Study 1 includes these steps. Among them, the construction of the interview model and program is based on the logotherapy model of Franke, and then integrate to the music culture by Chinese people. This is a model from my Chinese doctoral thesis. It contains 3 dimensions: physical, mental, and spiritual. And each dimension corresponds to a different intervention method. And this is my final intervention plan after experiments and expert consultation. And it is also comes from my Chinese doctoral thesis. Why I use Guqin? We know Guqin is a Chinese ancient, sorry, I'm a little nervous.
It's a Chinese instrument which is important also for philosophy. In ancient China today, the Guqin also was called the father of wisdom. So we cannot separate music and ontology and philosophy. It's one, and it's concentrated in the sound of this instrument.
Thank you for your help. I always use Guqin to music meditation. For example, when a patient listens to the Guqin, he or she will express her or his feeling with song or driving. Here is he or she's work. This is my study 2. This is a quantitative study, and it includes these 4 parts. Evaluate feasibility to text to effect of psychological plan intervention and impact on quality of life. Of course, I also do some discussion. This is the whole step of it. The first step is calculate the simple things based on the pre-experiment in my study 1, and the sample size is 28 people. Next is a presentation of the result of study 2. The primary outcome measure was depression and anxiety, and the second outcome measure was life treatment. Because of the time factor, I will present this part very quickly. This is my data. So, inclusion from the above conclusion, music therapy can improve patients' anxiety and depressions and improve their quality of life. Next is study 3, which is qualitative. This study is part of the valuation of research process in study 2. It was designed to explore how music therapy interventions work, including the intervention programs themselves, and other background factors that may promote or hinder intervention. The subject of this study is from the patients who enjoy the study 2 and fully research all the music therapy innovation. This is a presentation of the result of study 3. What I need to point out is that research data comes not only from interview, but also from artistic works such as music, poetry, painting, and their diaries created by patients. Next, there is the presentation of the research result, which also come from a Chinese doctoral thesis, resulting in the clothing table and the diagram. This is the model. And the final part of the result, I use the cross-case comparison method to integrate qualitative research data and quantitative data. The result was 75% agreement. Finally, this is the conclusion of my research. Through 3 parts of research to drive the following conclusion. Thank you for your listening. Today I will show.
Thank you very much, Kimao. I would like to ask Wolfgang Mastnak.
Yeah.
Do you think now to communicate with Kimao?
I just would like to have 2 minutes to give from my perspective the most important features of Maoti's work. Just very shortly, there are 3 points. The first is she showed that music therapy can alleviate a broad spectrum of symptoms in gastric cancer patients. Point 2, she used Chinese philosophy and found it is very close to the approaches of Viktor Frankl and his approach in philosophy and psychotherapy, his existential approach. So there is a direct link between philosophically orientated psychotherapeutic approaches in the West and in China. And the third is, as most research on music in medicine reduces music just to listening. This has a good reason, because randomized controlled trials are very easy to perform with only listening. She showed that a very distinct interaction between her playing the guzhìn in life, in hospital, and the responses of the patients is crucial for the outcome. The responses of the patients were, on the one hand, verbally, they explained, but also artistically. They painted or they wrote poems, for example, on how they feel the approach of the death and how they feel relieved, and they feel a certain transition from life to another world due to Taoism or to Buddhism. So 3 points that belong together and are very different. Symptom reduction, philosophical bridge between Europe and China, and the third, a very distinct music therapeutic model that responds in an empathetical way to the experience of cancer in the patients. Thank you for listening, and thank you, Mao-Qi, for your explanation.
Thank you so much, Wolfgang. I would now invite Dušan Šuput to conduct the communication with Peter Herrmann, because Dušan will have to go earlier tonight. He has Dušan, please. Dušan? You have to unmute you.
Okay. Yeah, really, I have to leave tomorrow early in the morning at 4 a.m., but I will stay as long as possible, because it was very interesting. I enjoyed both lectures. And maybe to start with Peter, in the first part, you talked about alienation, and this alienation is not only between people and nature, it's very global. And you also mentioned that God did not make us, but his product of people, which is, of course, left to everybody what he thinks. But I'd like to come to artificial intelligence. And maybe it's really the time now when we are starting to build a God, that will see everything, hear everything, judge everything, and control our lives. With artificial intelligence, if we trust it too much and put our responsibility away and leave it to artificial intelligence, now this will be maybe my relation to your last part of your talk about law. Then we are really lost, But if you come to your description, how law principles would be more appropriate, I agree completely. But I doubt also completely that people will somehow understand such a change if it happens. People like to know what is right, what is wrong, how to behave. But now, you know, the whole society should be very intelligent and not alienated to be able to accept your approach to changes in law. What do you think?
Well, I think in both respects, I would not say it's only on artificial intelligence, it's as well that the main thing, or the two main things, it's discourse, accepting all three sides with their specific interests, with their abilities, capabilities, and it is about the understanding, not in the interest of one side, but to say there is an interest, and this interest means as well we have to control the limits in terms of our own limits, but as well in terms of figuring out what the limits of the others are. You are right, I think there is the problem of people just follow, but this is exactly if they are fed in a certain way, and if the interests are predefined, growth, consumption, making use, utilizing nature, utilizing artificial intelligence, then we are misleading. Engaging a little bit with artificial intelligence, I'm not afraid of ChatGPT or Bard, Google or whatsoever. I'm afraid of us allowing or us understating our own interests. We are asking the wrong questions and then we get the wrong answers. If we open up to ask questions, for instance, music and cancer, two completely different things. What are you talking about? Bringing them together, being open to bring them together, this is something we have to allow ourselves as academics, ourselves as practitioners in medicine, ourselves as musicians and as doctors, medical doctors. And we have to inform people in a way, sorry to refer another time to Mel, we have to accept that are not fools automatically and that are not pigs automatically, but if they get what they want in terms of this openness, I think then they can deal with it. And then we can deal as well with a different approach to law.
Yeah, I think you are right, but I didn't mean ChatGPT, which is very infantile way of artificial intelligence still. But once artificial intelligence starts gathering data by itself, by sensors, you know, then it will become more potent because sensors can see more, even more than we do. And I think a control over people by AI could be a big problem. And I don't know how to deal with it. But mostly I agree with you. I just don't know what will happen in future. And maybe if I can ask something for the second lecture, Chima, I think it's very interesting to see how music can somehow interfere with understanding one's disease and accepting or not accepting and relieving pain, anxiety, and so on. It would be very interesting to study. Maybe Wolfgang can add something to that. If you would study that together with MRI or let's say with EEG to see what parts of brain are actually involved in this process.
Yes, perhaps I begin also continuing with Professor Herrmann. You, in my perspective, very, very important focus on the issue of alienation. In psychiatry and in psycho-oncology, we every day are confronted with patients who have the impression they have lost their personality. In psychiatry, it could be in psychosis, in schizophrenia, in personality disorders, and so on. In Psycho-Oncology, they feel something, it is the cancer, is about to destroy them, and they lose their life, they lose their self. This cannot only be solved by medical approaches. It needs an approach from philosophy, from theology, and so on. It needs precisely what the European Academy of Sciences and Arts is standing for, this integral of the approaches. And Dušan, you asked me which parts can be influenced. For example, the anger and the bad emotions against the cancer, against the approaching death, has a lot to do with the amygdala in the brain.
Yeah.
And we know that the amygdala in the brain here is sensitive to music. We also know that a loss of personality, a certain feeling of alienation in human beings, has to do with dysfunctions in the medial prefrontal cortex, in the lower parts, and also those parts are interacting with music, for example, via the insular cortex. So what is interesting, what Mao Tse explained on a phenomenological level, so it lowers anxiety, it lowers the stress, it lowers the pain, and so on, we can find on brain levels. And what is important for our research, we speak of, for example, pain-music interfaces. We are doing research on the interfaces in the brain that connect those areas, those systems that create anxiety and the system of music. So that is a very, very complex and dynamic approach, and also a dynamic process in the brain.
Maybe just one question before I leave it to everybody else, and soon I will have to leave. Probably it's important what kind of music. And now a lot of approaches in music are somehow employing dissonance and things that are not really pleasant to hear, you know. Can you say that music in general is a cure, or is there a certain kind of music, or let's say rhythm or whatever important?
That's a very good and very complex question. On the one side, you mentioned the dissonance. We have a region in the brain. It's the anterior part of the cingulate gyrus in the center of the brain, which responds to dissonance, but not to a dissonance according to theory, but a personally experienced dissonance. So the personal feeling of music is important. Another point, and this is based on also collaboration with the Department of Neurosciences at Harvard University. We know today that the phenomenon of sound improves neuroplasticity, so improves the dynamic networking in the brain. The third, Ansend Mao Tse's approach is a wonderful example for that. It needs music that can be understood by the patient and that responds to the patient. In China, Mao Tse tried several forms and found that the old Wuxin, this very meditative music, is a very good approach. Today, we are doing also together with the UNESCO in northern Vietnam research on how music influences the brain and the psyche of those people. So it has to do with the feature, the cultural feature and the cultural background and acculturation of the patients.
But does it have anything to do by shifting of attention from depression, anxiety, pain, to change attention and go to music? You know, if it's pleasant, maybe they follow and attention to the other parts dissolves.
It surely will be also in clinical context a collaboration, and a very important thing when you speak about lowering anxiety and so on, it has to do with the so-called default mode network, which is on the one side a center of creativity and also a center which has much to do with the subconscious self. And this network, the default mode network, responds extremely to music. So it's really, music is a booster of that. So we are about to research to find out, it's far away from knowing the total, but we are about to find out the underlying mechanisms. And the university mode, he's working at Beijing University. We are at the moment establishing quite big research, combining qualitative research, medical research, neurophysiological research, and so on, in music and the arts on specific diagnoses.
Peter would like to add something. Really, it's very, very interesting. I'd like to stay longer. I will still stay some time, but I will disappear silently. And now I'm giving word to Peter and asking Violeta to continue then with my moderation.
Thank you very much, and have a nice trip and success, Dušan. And
but
see.
Peter is now.
Okay. But before I give the word to Peter Herrmann, I would like to transport the question of a scientist who is in our public, Lelia Bekesh. She would like to ask you if there is a possibility to measure the anxiety disappear. If, for example, puts from 1 to 10. And it's also her question, how is it possible to measure anxiety from the point of view of the patient, or how is it? And also she asked there was a discussion which music she spoke so Kima about the music. Please.
Is that a question to me, to Mao Qi?
It's a question for both of you, in fact.
Okay, then I begin. Firstly, anxiety is always a personal phenomenon. So the key is always the subjective failing. On the other side, we have international standardized inventories to measure. So we also used those inventories. If you say from 0 to 10, I remember one patient of Mao Qi, he was very, very anxious. So let's say 8, and it lowered to 3 and 2, but not only because it was a one-dimensional thing of lowering anxiety, but he got a feeling that it's natural that his life is going towards an end, and there is a certain transition concerning his philosophical and spiritual background. On the level of the brain, we can measure, and we know that anxiety as a complex phenomenon. We have on the one side, I spoke about the amygdala, the corpus amygdaloideum, which responds. We have the other, which is the cognitive interpretation of the anxiety. This is prefrontal, has to do with cognition. Anxiety is an existential phenomenon, which has deeply to do with the centers in the brain that represent the self, and it has to do with physiological reactions, responses of stress and so on, of adrenaline. So these are the neurophysiological and the physiological correspondence to anxiety. So short answer to this question, the first, it's always subjective, and the most important is the patient. The second, we use international standardized medical inventories to measure how to lower. And the third is we have quite a lot of centers in the brain that collaborate to create what we feel as anxiety.
Thank you very much. And regarding music, so Kim Ao told us about her complex researches, and but she didn't tell us about the music she used. Can you, Kim Ao, answer the question for Lelia Bakesh?
Mauzi, tell us about the Gutin.
Okay. Thank you for your question. And thank you very much, Professor Mastnak, for your answer. I always use Chinese folk song.
Just explain how you sing, explain how you play the Gutin.
How I play Guqin?
Yes. How the sound is. Explain the music, explain the core of that.
Okay, I often play the Guqin live. But sometimes I choose record music. And the Guqin song is very old. They and usually belong to the top 10 famous Chinese folk song.
May I add a little bit?
The
Guqin is the classical zither. So it's a 7-stringed instrument, which is not at all loud. And you hear a lot of different forms. So there's a saying, we have 1,500 different forms how to produce sounds. So there's a big variety. And there's a saying that the sounds of the Guqin, of this string instrument, represents also the whole spectrum of failings of the human being. Those old songs Mauzi mentioned are not only written songs like in the West, in the Romantic League, for example. The text has much to do with Chinese philosophy of life and so on. So it is a flowing together of the sound, of philosophy, and of the actual being in the moment.
Thank you very much. So in fact, this is a music who, being so old, she is becoming, so it's survived the centuries. I think also about the Orthodox liturgy, also very
Yeah.
And so it's a universe. I would like to open our discussion, and please, I would like to ask you if you have questions. I do not know if I can discover who would like to ask something, to explain something also, please. I don't see here anything.
Peter would like to say something.
Yeah, please. Wonderful. Please. Marisa, I saw
Yes.
your...
Yes, I have a question, a very simple question that is connected with the second talk that I found really extremely interesting. So my question is the following. What happens actually during a therapy, a musical therapy? To what extent is the patient only passive with respect to music? The patient is only listening to a given piece of music, or sometimes the patient is also active. He's playing, for instance, this particular Chinese instrument or other instruments, or sometimes the patient is singing. What is the importance of a singing activity? For instance, singing in a group, singing in a chorus, and other important differences for the clinical effects in the case of an active participation of the patient, or simply passive participation. So this is my question.
That's a very good question, which leads back to the beginning of Western music therapy. 40 years ago, there was the differentiation between receptive and active music therapy. Receptive, the passive patient, and active, the active patient. Today, we do not use that anymore. That has a reason. We just say it's the music encounter. It's two perspectives from the clinical practice. For example, neonatology, so preterm born children usually develop really serious neurological problems. We have experience that singing mothers, also music in the incubator, reduces extremely this. So the most important is the singing mother. Second example, especially from the university clinical in Munich, breast cancer patients. They were really angry against this region and hated the region, which they said it destroys my life. Young patients, they began to sing, and they began to discover this region produces beauty, which has to do with myself. And it helped them to overcome this anger and to integrate this region again. Third example, we know that singing together heightens the oxytocin level. So oxytocin is not only the hormone that triggers the birth, but it also improves the personal relationship. So it can help, for example, in choirs of depressive patients to directly influence the status of the brain. There is you were speaking about singing, there is a huge ascendant of singing in music therapy. And we are doing research why, as it's so good, why can it help? And especially in medical contexts, we try to precisely differentiate which clinical problems, which diagnoses, and which cultural backgrounds and musical preferences of the patient require which music. There is not one standard, but in this context, we have to develop the music therapeutic interaction.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Peter, Herrmann, would you like to respond to this very interesting aspect of trying to put together two different words, the different medicine and music? How is your thought about this?
Well, there are three aspects I wanted to emphasize. Hugely respecting your work with music, I think it is not just music. You mentioned in connection with with your last comments, the productive aspects. We have these productive aspects in arts, whatever it is, in literature, in so many areas. So this is the one aspect. Yes, strongly agree, it is important, but as well go beyond this and look at the productive aspect. And this going then to the second part, in a way you are dealing when it's too late, with therapy, when people are sick, when they are affected by the need of therapy. Let's live in a way of therapy. Let's avoid this. Let's use these means as well, arts, music, literature, encourage people living it in their daily life. And this means as well, of course, a huge effort in terms of society and in terms of how we shape it, understanding production, not what I said in terms of production of goods, of commodities, but producing ourselves in the environment with the others, with there is this orientation. If we look back, the most outstanding person or well-known person, Leonardo da Vinci, he was hugely productive in all these areas. I think he did not do any music, but at least in other areas, he was hugely productive. He was outstanding. And I think this is a potential we all have. Looking at children, instead of destroying them, streamlining them, get them out and leave and develop their different abilities. Of course, they need employment, but universities should not be there as simple mechanism to employ to train people for employment. They should develop, or another case, in Austria, it's the Matura. It is making people mature in the educational system, not specializing. This is what they can do later. And for this, they may use artificial intelligence, but they may use it only if they are capable to have themselves the abilities. There is this often misused sentence: "There is no right life in a wrong society." And this is, I think, the general point. If we do not work on society to change this, to have this only orientation on what it is now, making things more competitive, and I think then we end up really with a dystopia. Not necessarily, but if we move on this way.
Thank you so much. Just a word, because I'm so happy you mentioned that so clearly and distinctly. The goal is not to wait until we need therapy, but the prevention. And we are also in contact with the World Health Organization that proclaimed a global program on mental health 2030. So actions and focusing also on culture and society. The WHO said health is not specifically a matter of medicine. It concerns the whole society. It's a social question, and we need culture and the arts to promote health in a complex way. We totally, dear colleague Herrmann, we totally agree on this point. Thank you so much.
It's so wonderful. It's like a conclusion of our meeting today. Thank you so much. So if you have questions, if you have commentary, please, you can tell us. So on the other hand, we are happy we are together today, and I would not like to insist. I would like just to say to you that we are happy to see you again in 2 weeks. And in fact, I have always a feeling that it is not enough what you have to say to us. That's why I would like so much to invite you again. Kimao, Peter Herrmann, and also Wolfgang Mastnak. And look to the future, and thank you so much. I wish you from all my heart health and success in all you're doing, and see you again.